Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Afternoons with the Ambassador. And today we are continuing our exploration of the archive of Star Wars lore. And to the chat, Darren McManus, I know you were in here earlier. Thank you for popping by. Hope you get to pop back by while we're live. And I've got with me, well, he says Padawan, but he's not a Padawan anymore. He's a Knight of Elysium. So, Elysium, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks.
So,
and looking forward to this.
And today we come to the briar patch of the Star Wars lore universe, the sequel trilogy. And I want to make a very quick preface before we get started. If you come across this and you are a fan of the sequel trilogy, I consider you just as much a fan as I am. Now, I myself am not a fan of the sequel trilogy, and I will outline a few reasons as to why as we go through this stream this afternoon. But I want to make it very crystal clear to everyone who comes through here. You love the sequels? I consider you a fan. I consider you a fellow fan. I just don't. That's me. So, anyway, Elysium, where do you want to start with this whole thing?
I suppose we'll start at the beginning of the sequels and move on.
Okay, so Force Awakens.
Force Awakens.
Okay. I opened the floor. What questions do you want? What questions have you got?
Well, I think initially when I was looking at the sequel trilogy, I was expecting Finn to be a Force user, but that's neither here nor there. But I have heard a lot of I'm just a casual fan, so I enjoyed them. There was some really dumb moments, but I've heard a lot of people say it's divorced itself a lot from what's gone before. And I'm just wondering from you, I didn't get that. But then again, I'm just a casual fan, and I suppose the real question is, where did it go so wrong?
Well, in terms of the sequels, it didn't really go wrong until the second installment. Now, there are some things that a lot of the fan base would have liked to have seen in The Force Awakens that we didn't necessarily get. We didn't get a moment or an adventure with the old characters and the new characters. We got kind of a hodgepodge because we didn't get our scene of Han, Luke, and Leia and Chewbacca all together again, along with the droids. We got introduced to these new characters, Finn and Rey and Poe Dameron and BB-8 and everything. And, of course, you know, a lot of people are of the mind that The Force Awakens, it wasn't bad, but some people have looked at it, and this is a position I share myself, that it was kind of a reboot or a soft remake of A New Hope. So, and very quickly to the chat, Sir Nerdlot, good afternoon, and hello there to you as well, my friend. Good to see you. And now, am I saying that the characters of Rey, Finn, and Poe and BB-8 aren't compelling or interesting characters? They have potential to be. I think there were a lot of interesting things set up for those three main characters that made them interesting. I will say for myself that Poe Dameron, I would have loved to have seen him and Han in a, not on the same side, but I would love to see the two of them in a dogfight together. You know, him and his X-Wing, and I'll say that was a beautiful X-Wing that they had made up for Poe, and Han and Chewbacca and the Falcon. I think that would have been a really cool. That would have been a cool thing right there. And Sir Nerdlot, he brings up a very interesting point. Luke should have been the main character in TFA, in his opinion. Sir Nerdlot, I think that's an opinion a lot of people share, myself included. I think, you know, this whole thing about the map to Luke Skywalker, it was an interesting plot device. It was a good plot device because everybody was looking for Luke. I mean, if you remember the opening crawl, it says Luke Skywalker has vanished. Why has Luke Skywalker vanished? Where did he go? Why did he vanish? And what are we going to do to find him? And throughout the course of the movie, we get this mission and everything. We've got this last fragment of the map to find Luke Skywalker, and we don't get Luke until the very end. He turns around, lowers his hood, and the screen goes to black. And we're like, okay, what the heck? Now, of anything I've said thus far, is there anything you want to touch upon?
Well, honestly, kind of the characters for me, I've heard people criticize Rey. She may be a Mary Sue, but for me, I actually liked her character, liked her personality.
Okay.
Poe Dameron, yes. Finn, I found that fascinating about until now, really, all stormtroopers have had their helmets on. And we got to see someone who wasn't indoctrinated, who went against them, seeing a stormtrooper have questions about what he's doing. I thought that was a great thing and could have gone more with it.
Yeah, honestly, I did enjoy that aspect of Finn's character. I mean, like you said, we've never seen. I mean, the only perspective we've seen really of the stormtroopers was maybe the clone troopers from the prequels and the Clone Wars animated series, and you had kind of a similar plot thread with Finn, because this is a guy who had been kind of recruited or inducted or whatever, or maybe even press ganged into the First Order's military. And we find out through the course of the movie, he's a janitor. Now, he's not a dyed-in-the-wool killer, but he's been in the First Order the majority of his life, we can infer. And he reaches a point where he doesn't agree with what the First Order is doing. If you remember the beginning of the movie, Kylo Ren orders all the troops that are with him to murder the entire village, including Laura Zanteca, played by the late Max von Sydow. And, I will say this, in terms of Poe's interaction with Kylo Ren and with Finn and everything, I kind of liked that he was kind of a smartass. I appreciated that. It was Han Solo-esque in a way. He's like, you talk, I talk. How do we do this here? He's like, I'm having a hard time understanding you. That kind of is a little bit like Han Solo, and I liked that about Poe. But again, it's against the backdrop of the fact, well, this feels like this feels very much like a soft reboot of A New Hope. You've got a desert planet, you've got an unknown on a desert planet, and you've got the plot device of a MacGuffin. So, in terms of the map to Luke Skywalker, and you've got two sides that are trying to get their hands on the map.
Yes, even I, as a casual fan, could see, you know what, there's a lot, this looks very familiar. And, yep, they said, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, seemed to be the same things seem to be, the same theme, same things seem to be running through the sequel. And it could have been its own thing. With Finn especially being a stormtrooper going against, he could have been such a great character, bringing more stormtroopers around. So you know what we're doing is wrong, winning a rebellion, and that, I think, yes, that is a missed opportunity. He was a character that wasn't utilized as much later on as he should have been. Yeah,
because here's the thing. There were some interesting and neat new characters that were introduced in the sequel trilogy. as you said, you found Rey interesting. Yeah, and you know what? For someone that is, as I said, a normie and everything, she is an interesting character. I myself was intrigued by the character of Rey. But as I've looked back in retrospect, I realize they didn't do a very good job conceptualizing the character. I mean, I'm not gonna fault Daisy Ridley. She did the best she could with what she was given. But we have plot threads picked up and then cut. We have plot threads picked up again and then cut. I mean, we get a lot of scenes that are head scratchers. Like, what the hell does this mean? In particular, in the scene where they're in Maz's cantina / castle, and she goes down into the cellar there, and for some reason, Maz has gotten her hands on the Skywalker lightsaber, and we have no idea why. Again, another plot point that's never explored, except it may be a comic book. And I'm sorry, that's not something that you put in a comic book. You don't have to have a very long scene to explain how Maz got her hands on the Skywalker lightsaber.
Even a throwaway line would have done.
I mean, anything. Anything is better than absolutely nothing that just dead silence. So
now, it did need to be explained in The Force Awakens, but it should have been explained at least in the next movie.
Yeah, in The Last Jedi, and that might have been a good move, because you have that scene there and everything where Rey is holding the saber, and she's trying to hand it to Luke, and you could have had Luke had some sort of Force vision, seeing the journey of the saber, how it got from Bespin to Maz's castle. And that would have been perfect. I think a lot of people would have been perfectly happy with that, myself included. And it didn't have to be terribly lengthy. It could have been as quick as maybe a minute or two flash or sequence or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And now it's back in Luke's hands. So, in terms of Force Awakens, what else do you want to ask?
Actually, it may have been addressed, like you were saying there, with a Force vision. Is the Force, in essence, sentient in itself?
Now, it's interesting that you would ask that question, because just a few months ago, I had a similar conversation with another channel and everything. There are lines of dialogue. Yeah, so there are a lot that's true. JJ left too many mystery boxes. Yeah, I agree. Sad but true. There is. It's not in any movies per se. There is like a throwaway reference by Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace, where he's explaining to young Anakin in Phantom Menace about the will of the Force. The midichlorians whisper to us, telling us the will of the Force. Now, to suggest that the Force has a will could lend credence to the argument that the Force has some sort of sentient thought. Now, the extent of that sentient thought, that's getting into a lot of metaphysical stuff, and I don't want to lose you on that unless you're really boned up on the metaphysics, particularly metaphysics in Star Wars. But
maybe not so much in Star Wars, but it would explain, like I think we mentioned it in earlier streams, how Rey suddenly seemed to be so adept at using lightsabers, using Force powers. If the Force was sentient, it could explain, in my mind as a normie, it could explain a lot, that the Force in essence, gave her the will or gave her the ability. If it was had that matrix style, like plugging in abilities. But then again, I could be getting the how it works all wrong.
Well, let's go off of the premise that the Force does in fact have a will. We don't know the extent of said will, but let's go off of the premise or the idea that the Force has some sort of will, that it has some sort of, I don't want to say agenda, but let's make the argument that the Force is seeking to maintain a balance within the Star Wars universe, and it enacts its will through people. And sometimes people can go with the flow of that will, and some people can go contrary to that will. Do you follow me thus far?
Yes.
Okay. If you want to talk about the example of someone that goes in the flow of the will of the Force, you could say Qui-Gon Jinn does. You could say to an extent Obi-Wan does. You could say Yoda does, and so on. Now, those that might go contrary to the Force, that try to bend its will to their own ends, you could argue that those are people like the ancient Sith, or the Sith of the prequel era, in particular with Sidious and Plagueis and Count Dooku and so on. Those are people that are going contrary to the will of the Force. They are the ones that are trying to exert their will upon the Force to make it do what they want rather than listening to what it wants done. And you could even make the argument that when Anakin turns into Darth Vader, he's bending the Force to his own will. Now, the one of the issues with the sequels is we don't have clear defined. Now we have clear ideas of who the protagonists and who the antagonists are. But the problem is we don't have clear ideas of what the protagonist or the antagonist want. Now, in a roundabout way, you could say that the Resistance or the Republic is trying to eliminate the First Order. You could say that the First Order is trying to eliminate the Republic / Resistance. But the problem, okay, now let me continue with this. But as far as the leadership in terms of, say, Kylo Ren or Snoke, the only motivation that we know that they have is the location and destruction of Luke Skywalker, the one that they deem to be the last Jedi living, because they fear him. But there usually has to be, okay, there sometimes has to be a bigger conflict than just the good guy versus the bad guy. Does that make sense to you?
It does.
Because just wanting to destroy Luke Skywalker and destroy the rebellion, well, that smacks of the basic themes or anything of the prequel and original trilogy. For the simple fact. Go ahead, Elysium, please.
No, I was saying it does. There's so much parallels with the original, or trying to shadow what the original did. And for me, the sequels were not as good as the original trilogy. Now, I enjoy them. The The Last Jedi was, some of that was painful. It was
Mhm.
stupidity. However,
Mhm.
for me, there is a personal connection because you can see the island that Luke was on from my ancestral home in
Mhm.
West Cork. You can see
Mhm.
those islands. So it's for me going, oh, wow, there they are.
Yeah.
So I was probably a bit more positively inclined towards the movies because I could recognize where they were shooting, where the
Right.
movie was made.
Mhm.
So yeah, that could explain a lot of why I enjoy the sequel trilogy more than maybe I should have.
Well, no, now, Elysium, let me make one thing clear. If you enjoyed the sequels, you are
Yes.
entitled to do so. I'm not trying to change your
Yeah.
mind. I'm just trying to help you understand how, in the grand scheme of things, how the sequels kind of broke things that have been established for 40 some odd years. And
And the and that's important because someone like me shouldn't like just movies like this with such history
mhm,
shouldn't be made just for people like me, the casual fan who'll come in, enjoy it, and leave. Someone who is a long term fan will stick with it and give it the momentum to carry on. So
mhm,
you should be, when you're making something, you can do both. Give service to me, enjoyment, because there was 6 movies before that that were enjoyable. There were
mhm,
some low points, more so in the prequel than in the original,
mhm,
but you had so much to draw from there. You didn't have to change things so much that it alienated a lot of the fans. I don't see why it couldn't be made for both. Yet I still enjoyed it, but I
mhm.
want to see where it went wrong so we could. I do know
Okay.
they are planning on more movies,
Yeah, I've heard
from
that
what I
too.
understand.
And yeah, it's going to be a few years down the road, but I've heard the same thing. Now, okay, this is me speaking from my perspective as a longtime fan. Where things started to go sideways wasn't really in the Force Awakens. I didn't have a major, like I said, I enjoy for the most part. I
Yeah,
enjoyed Force Awakens, even though I look at it, I'm like, there's a lot of plot threads here that are similar to what was in A New Hope, but with some minor changes. So, um, I would have liked the fact that they explained how the Skywalker lightsaber ended with Maz Kanata.
yes,
I would have liked. I know this might be a minor nitpick, but I would have preferred that Han and Leia were still together rather than them separated. Um, I know again this is a minor
yeah.
nitpick, but after Han's death, yes, spoiler warnings, folks. Han Solo died in The Force Awakens. For those of you who don't know, but I would have preferred that Leia went to console Chewie rather than console Rey. I think that was a major misstep because you have to realize Han and Chewbacca have been together for decades, literally.
Yeah,
And Han and Rey have been together maybe a few hours at the very most. So it didn't make any sense
yeah,
for Leia to go console Rey, even though her witnessing Han's death was traumatic. But I would have preferred maybe a scene where Rey and Finn and Poe were gathered together and they were consoling one another, and then maybe Han or not Han, but Leia and Chewbacca could try and console each other,
yeah.
and they all tried to console one another together. And to the chat, Jared McManus, glad you popped back in.
Yeah.
So, uh, first viewing of TFA, I thought it was just a rehash, but other people I know who never saw Star Wars really liked it. And you know what? That's true. That's very true. And Sir Nerdlot, I'm not exactly following your comment. Handles. You have to give me a little reference, bud. But that for me, I think would have been a much better scene. I mean, Ray and Finn and Poe,
Yes.
or well, at least Poe wasn't there, but at least Finn and Ray were there, and maybe have some sort of memorial service for Han at the end after the destruction. Well, let's see. No, okay. I'm trying to remember. Starkiller Base
Yes.
was destroyed after Han's death, so maybe have some sort of memorial service. Oh, okay, that's all right. No problem, Sir Nerdlock. Gotcha. All right. Have some sort of memorial service for Han Solo. I mean, this was a guy who was a general in the rebellion. This is a guy who fought to bring peace to the galaxy. And again, the thing I would have much rather had was Han and Leia together rather than them separated. And maybe he goes, he's like, honey, I gotta go find the Falcon. Or maybe not even have the Falcon out of his possession. Maybe change that part of it. I mean, this was one of Han Solo's most prized possessions, the Millennium Falcon. He cared about this thing almost as much as he did a person. To him, it was not just a ship. It was something he cared about deeply. And having it just sitting rusting on Jakku, I think there could have been a much better way to bring the new characters in rather than having Han separated from his ship. So
it could have been Ray. Like, I know the Falcon was on Jakku. She was scavenging. She could have been scavenging, had the part they needed to get off, and that's how it could have been, possibly.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean,
Or she scavenged it for him. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry.
Yes.
The other, I'll say for me, those were the big issues I had with The Force Awakens. Aside from that, I mean, was it a lot of fan service? Yeah, but I'm a fan, so okay, go ahead, give me some fan service. I'm fine with that. Now, fan service can go too far. I do agree. I do believe in that and everything, but a little bit doesn't hurt.
For me,
fun.
actually, sorry, your point about having a memorial service for Han, that would not have just been for within the movie, but for the fans who are watching, saying, let the fans mourn, like we who, like those, like me, I'm a casual fan, and even I would have said, yeah, Han Solo is a great character. Someone who's a much bigger fan, you give service to the fans by hold up that memorial service, acknowledge what happened.
And you know what? Even
that was just me.
Well, you know, and here's the thing: maybe that was the catalyst for bringing Luke back in. You know, yeah, they got the map, they finally located him, but he's like, Han's dead. This is one of my closest friends. This is a man I went to war with. This is a man who is the father of my nephew. I'm coming back to honor him. That, to me, I think would have been a great entry point for Luke into The Force Awakens. I think that would have been a way. Go ahead.
I was just saying that would have actually not finding the map with Luke returning. I thought that may have been a better way. Possibly. That they actually didn't need a map. Luke returned by himself.
Yeah. And to the chat, Darth Astor and Wookiee Supremacy. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good to see you both. Yeah, and Darth Astor, you're right. Having Luke return and everything for Han's memorial service and Leia and Rey and the rest of the Resistance saying, "Luke, we need you. Will you help us?" And him saying, "Seriously, is this a question?" Of course. He's going to help him. This is Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
This is a man who quite literally went through hell to save his father. Of course he's going to help his sister. Of course he's going to help those that are in the Resistance that he might remember. So, and it would have been a new and original story, but it brought all the characters that we loved back together. Even if we don't get to see them all together for one last big adventure together on the Falcon, we get to see Rey and Luke and maybe Finn. Okay. Better. Hold on a second. Han dies when they go to try and lower the shields. And they succeed in that. So where do you bring Luke in? I'm kind of misremembering the movie. Sorry about that.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen it myself.
So the question is, how do you bring Luke back? How do you bring Luke in before the last big fight? Maybe they use the map, they find him, but they send Han and Chewie and the other three, or at least Finn and Rey with them, to bring him back. Have the droids come along, maybe, or at least just R2. It doesn't have to be both 3PO and R2. Just have R2 with them. So, and then hey, bud, we need you. Will you come back? And he's like, how bad is it? And Han's like, it's bad. They've got this brand new base. It's like the Death Star, only 10 times bigger. We need you, bud. And Luke's like, okay, I'm coming. Let's go. And you don't necessarily have to have him flying his own X-Wing. He's there on the Falcon. And you have a mentoring scene between Luke and Rey. And you're like, and he's like, you're strong. I sense a force in you. And she's like, I thought you were a myth. He's like, do I look like a myth? And she's like, no, you don't look like a myth. You're very real. She's like, so you're Luke Skywalker. He's like, I am him. She's like, can you teach me? Can you teach me how to use the Force like you did? He's like, I will tell you some advice that an old friend told me. You have just taken your first step into a larger world. Kind of echo what Obi-Wan said to him, but he says it to Rey. She's willing to learn, and he's like, I will teach you, just as I was taught, but better. And then, of course, you have the big final confrontation, and instead of having it be Poe or Rey battle Kylo Ren, you have Luke there, and you have that emotional connection when he sees Ben kill Han. Yeah. And you see Chewbacca lash, and Chewbacca has this scene where he lashes out in rage. But then the Force, you have Luke and you have Kylo or Ben face off. And you have Rey doing something else. Maybe you have her fight alongside him, and she gets knocked out or something. It could go any number of ways, truly. And of course, you have them ultimately destroy Starkiller Base. and so on. And maybe you have some sort of brief force connection between Luke and Snoke realizes, crap, they found Luke, or Luke found them. Well, time to bump up Ben's training. That gives stakes.
Well, her learning from Luke in that case would explain a lot more, and that would have given that still would have entertained.
Well,
and it's harkening back to the old movies. If you're repeating some of the cycles like they did, Derek was mentioning, it was like a rehash. You could play with that and subvert, change something. Some things stay the same, some things change. So you're expecting things, and you can change things about. You're servicing the fans, and new people in are just as entertained.
Yeah. And Darth Vader brings up, well, she wasn't taught anything. Yeah, unfortunately, she never was. But in my version, both what I'm talking about here with Elysium and the fan fiction I'm writing, she is going through training.
Yes.
For those of you that have listened to my fan fiction and everything, I have Rey going through training. She isn't just all powerful right from the go. She realizes she screwed up. I mean, I'm not really spoiling anything for those of you that have listened to my fan fiction. I've got Rey being trained by Luke and by the Force ghosts of Anakin and Obi-Wan. And I might throw a couple others in there. I may not. I don't want to have it be like Force Ghost Palooza. But, and then at the end, you have the memorial service for Han. You have the celebration and everything of them destroying Starkiller Base. And you have Luke and Rey get in a ship, a transport or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Falcon, or it could be the Falcon. Doesn't matter. And he's like, come on. It's time to learn. And they go talk to.
Yep. And great place for them then when there is a previous connection for her to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a similar thing that Luke still dies in the second movie.
Maybe.
And that's more maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a maybe, but that's a possibility. But it makes a lot more sense to have those connections build up rather than knowing someone for an hour, picking up something out of nowhere. Honestly, for me, I really enjoyed the characters, and that made up for an awful lot of head scratching.
Yeah. Now, that's just us trying to fix and explore the lore of The Force Awakens. Is there anything else that you want to cover in terms of that and everything before we move on?
No, I think we can always drop back if I think there's something connected, but I think we could move on to the this is one. Even the next one for me was a bit of I enjoyed it, but it had, what the hell did I just watch?
I said something, the night me and the missus and a friend of mine, we went to see it. When we walked out, I was like, what the heck did we just see? And she was like, I don't know. Where are they going to go with this? They killed off the main bad guy. What are they going to do in the next one? Who's going to be the bad guy? Well, Kylo Ren could have been the bad guy in the third movie or whatever. But yeah, there's a lot of hits. You're not, believe me, you're not the only one. I mean, after watching it a second time, I was like, you dirty SOB. But we're not here.
Yeah.
We're not here to tear anybody a new one. We're here to try and understand the lore and try and say, okay, what can we do to fix this? to where it makes some sort of logical sense. And we've already done some of that with what we just discussed. Because you bring Luke Skywalker in within the last maybe 30 minutes or so of The Force Awakens, and you have him and Rey go back to Ahch-To, where she's training. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now and that fixes a big chunk of the movie right there. You don't have frumpy Luke who's angry and not willing to train anybody who's cut himself off from the Force. You've got Luke who is actually Luke. Is a continuation of the character we met in episodes 4, 5, and 6. Except now he's older, he's wiser, he's more powerful, and he's willing to give training new Force users another go. And he's going to start with this young woman, Rey. Now, the other part of this thing that we have to address is, well, everything else. Now, Elysium, I open the floor. Where do you want to go from here?
I suppose before we begin kind of going, well, that was wrong. Mm-hmm. I do want to kind of bring up some things that I remember from, I watched it once, The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Some of the humor I enjoyed. Poe talking to Hux at the start going, just messing with him. I really enjoyed that. And that built his character. One or two other things I enjoyed. I just remember seeing the characters were enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
Rose Tico, I think, I don't know, what they did with her. She could have been a really good character.
Yeah.
Because I thought she was possibly going to be engaging, but it just didn't hit the right notes.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, there was a lot with this one that Luke didn't seem to be Luke. Some stuff was that cave that Rey ended up in where she saw the mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking, what is going on here?
Yeah. Now, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just thinking that is going. When I was watching that seemed to remind me of the Empire Strikes Back, where Luke was in the ended up fighting Darth Vader and saw his own head inside in the helmet. Mm-hmm. So it seemed to be trying to parallel again a bit the previous movie, The Empire Strikes Back, but not nearly as good as The Force Awakens did with A New Hope. And it just was a mess. So it's difficult to know where to begin because this one was, of all the Star Wars movies, my least favorite.
Mm-hmm. And you are not alone there, Elysium, believe me. And to the chat, Derek McManus, at the start of The Last Jedi, both sides have suffered a major loss. That should have been the starting point. Yeah, you're not wrong. But the thing you have to remember in Empire, because this one does kind of mirror, the Death Star had been destroyed, but that didn't eliminate the rest of the Imperial Navy. And the Imperials were trying to find the rebels, and eventually, obviously, they do. Obviously, same thing happens here with The Last Jedi. Yeah, the First Order had their station destroyed, but we can assume that they have a very large fleet or a very large navy and army and everything at their disposal still. They've suffered a setback, yes, but it hasn't crippled them. And Sir Nerdlot, I will say visually, the Holdo maneuver scene, it was beautiful. It was stunning.
Yes.
But it also renders a lot of space battles moot. Because essentially all you have to do is build enough empty ships, and a lot of people have made this argument and everything. I think it is relatively valid. Yeah. Both sides just build a bunch of empty ships, load them with explosives, set them for autopilot, and then just have them do the jump to hyperspace and blow each other up. I'm sorry, that doesn't give you any stakes because both sides can just keep doing it until one, they run out of ships or run out of resources or run out of credits. So
it looked beautiful, but yeah, it made absolutely no sense. And that chase scene, honestly, that was for me painful, because all you had to do was hyper jump or whatever it is, do the just in front of them. You're not just following a ship along at, was it sublight speed? Ships can move faster than light. They could have just come up, jumped ahead of them, and come back towards them. It made
or just
absolutely no sense.
Or send a fraction, or just send a couple of ships ahead of the rebels or the resistance.
Yeah,
and
just wait for them.
Or you don't even necessarily have to wait for them. Just have them jump ahead, and poof, end of chase. I mean, let's be honest here. The chase in Empire Strikes Back, it had stakes, it had pacing, it had action to it, and it was creative, and it was a great sequence. I mean, you've got one lone ship running from running from part of Vader's task force, and you've got them being chased by TIE fighters. You've got them going through that asteroid field and everything else. Now, the question becomes, how do we fix all this? Well, I think one thing is eliminating the hyperspace tracking. I think that right there is one thing that should have been eliminated from the start. You don't necessarily... now, tracking technology in Star Wars has been established. We know this. But it's not as simple as having some sort of device that can just track a ship wherever they go. You have to have something on the opposing ship that allows the other side to track you. If you remember in A New Hope, while the Falcon is on the Death Star, they have a tracking device placed on the Falcon. Ergo, they could track the Falcon to wherever they went. With Last Jedi, they completely eliminated that. I think it would have been much more intense and maybe a little more interesting to have the Resistance escape and, I don't know, have an insider, maybe have a traitor, maybe have Vice Admiral Holdo be a turncoat, maybe have her be an inside agent, and the Resistance gets to Crate or wherever, and she rats them out. And then you've got stakes. You've got a whole issue with, oh crap, we've been betrayed. And very quickly to the chat, Speaker for the Dead. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for coming by. I hope you're doing well, my friend. So, I think right there that would have been a much more interesting and a much more intense sequence of events, rather than just having the First Order be able to track the rebels and the rebels running out of gas. I'm sorry. The matter of fuel has never, ever been a part of the Star Wars universe. And I don't know why it was introduced here, but it should not have been. I am just saying.
No, I'd agree with you. The idea of the traitor actually would have been a much better plot, because then you could you have all of the ships going back to the same point? Because it just reminds me of Battlestar Galactica, the episode 33, where the Cylons were tracking them, and you didn't know what ship was. Was there a spy? Was there something? And it could have been that the rebels just had to keep moving. And if they were being tracked, something similar to that. You don't know, was it tracking? Was it a spy? Could have ended up being a spy. But it just, the way they did it was just terrible.
Or for heaven's sakes, it doesn't even have to be necessarily be Holdo. Have it be Rose, but have Rose be the turncoat. Have her be the traitor. I mean, it's an idea. It may not be the best idea, but it is an idea. I mean, but if you want to work with from the point of, okay, you've got a high ranking officer that turns out to be a traitor to the resistance, and it's Vice Admiral Holdo.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
basically you lay, okay. I'm going to say this, and I know it might upset a few people, but I did not like the scene where Leia gets ejected out into space.
Neither did I. It just made it made no sense.
So, okay, the way you change that around is, okay, you have the ship damaged, but you don't have her ejected into space, but you have her still incapacitated somehow. I mean,
yeah.
Go that route. And
it
maybe
could have been Rey sensing her if she was on the ship, racing. Hang on, I sense someone that there's danger. And that could have been her developing her. Well, actually, Rey wasn't there, but
no, Rey was with
maybe
in the version we're putting together. Rey is with Luke.
That's
Rey
true,
is training with Luke.
Maybe
but
Finn, maybe Rose. That they have some. Not everyone has the massive ability, but they have some ability.
I would have been. Well.
Then again, that's me from being just a casual fan, not fully understanding.
I think I don't. I think trying to give everybody the Force is a mistake. I don't particularly care for that. I mean, yeah, some people have a certain amount of affinity to the Force, but they can't exercise it like a Jedi or a Force wielder can. So maybe not so much have it be them trying to intuit through the Force who the heck the traitor is, who told the First Order that they're on Crate, but maybe have it be a whodunit, and eventually it's uncovered that it's Holdo that does it. She's the one that sent a transmission secretly to the First Order saying, we're here, come get us. Come get me out of here, get me away from these filthy rebels.
There is that one thing I was thinking, because we'd mentioned it, that Finn, a lot of the First Order stormtroopers were press ganged.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been someone with family who has been press ganged, and look, you've got to release them, or you've got to. That's someone who's trying not out of love for family, rather than out of wanting to betray the rebellion.
And and that's a possible. That could have been a possibility too. But at this point, Finn has cut all his ties to the First Order. They don't really have a way of getting a hold of him. Whereas you say you have a high-ranking official in the Resistance.
Yes.
But the whole time, that high-ranking official has been a spy, a double agent, whatever.
And it could have been an explanation why the Alliance or the Rebels or the Republic were hit so easily, we'll say, by the Starkiller base in 1. The information of their location was given away by a high-ranking official.
Mm-hmm.
It would tie in a little better, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, and Cerner brings up an interesting point. I think they use that scene mainly to show Leia's Force power. Poorly executed, though. Another thing that probably could have been established in The Force Awakens. Yeah. We can make the inference that in the intervening years after the Return of the Jedi, Luke did train Leia. And okay, she's older in TFA, so she's not doing any of the acrobatic stuff and anything like another Jedi would be per se, because Carrie Fisher, she simply couldn't. But maybe have her have access to Force abilities, say like Force levitation, Force empathy or telepathy or whatever, that bond, that connection that Luke and Leia have and everything, where she can tell he's alive, she can sense that he's in danger, stuff like that. Maybe have that be the extent of her powers, which is realistic. yeah, she still has her lightsaber, but she's not getting into duels. Maybe she's using force reflexes to block blaster bolts and so on. Something like that. Something that would be a realistic person of her age.
Does the Force allow, we'll say, to mold, we'll say, pull metal? For instance, like when she was jumped out into space, if she used her Force ability to make seal a canister over her, like pull metal, and that was enough air to get her back to the ship, that would have made a bit more sense. But then again, I don't know the Force ability.
There really isn't a force ability like that. I mean, force telekinesis doesn't really. It could function that way, but we've never really seen it in the movies. If you want to stick strictly to canon lore or movie lore, we've never seen force telekinesis used in that way. We've primarily seen it used to pull objects or others or anything to another person or repel them, with force push or anything, kind of like what Darth Maul did to Obi-Wan in the Phantom Menace. But as far as forming any type of structures, it's not really something we've seen. I'm not saying it couldn't necessarily be done, but it would be a bit excessive, particularly the fact that Leia is almost instantaneously ejected into space. There's no real reaction time. I mean, I'm sorry, that scene is just that's stretching believability even for a fictional universe. I mean, the Force can do a lot of things, but that just seems to be stretching it beyond the limits or anything of what could be conceivable.
I do believe scientifically it is plausible, but I think from anyone who's watched science fiction, we've watched things that just doesn't happen. So it just took the believability, whatever whatever investment I was having in the movie, that destroyed a lot of it.
Yeah. And I can understand why. You're coming at this from a person who doesn't understand or doesn't know the lore of the Star Wars universe, but even you can understand. Okay, this is going a little bit too far.
Yes.
So, what else? Anything about the Last Jedi? Do you want to discuss?
It's just for the lore. Yeah, we've covered a lot. I think a lot of the problems with The Last Jedi is the writing. Although I was not a fan of her character.
Yeah, she
was an unlikable character. From my point of view, she was a very unlikable character.
A lot of people have said the same thing, Elysium. I myself have said the same. Even when I watched it and everything the first and second time through, I was like, I don't particularly care for this character. And it had nothing to do with her, with the overt agenda that they have shoved into her character. I was just like, I don't like this character. She doesn't behave in the way that a person in the military normally would. I mean, yeah, I can understand some eccentricities and everything when it comes to military personnel, particularly officers and everything, like high-ranking officers like generals, admirals, and so on. I mean, for heaven's sake, one of our greatest generals, George S. Patton, a lot of people considered him a bit of a screwball and a rebel and very unorthodox, but he got results. I mean, a lot of people said his attitude was very abrasive, but ultimately he got results. But the thing is, with Holdo, you're stretching what people can accept to an extreme degree. I mean, this woman is just being abrasive. She's being rude. She's not keeping things. She's not keeping the proper military structure. I mean, yeah, I get that Poe was demoted, but that doesn't mean that you don't tell anyone what your plan is. And then you just flip on a dime and you're like, oh, I really like him. And Leia's like, so do I. I'm sorry, that stretches credibility and believability, at least for me. Because
for her, sorry, Ambassador.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, for her to be what she was, she really needed to have been in the previous movie. She could have been abrasive in this one, but show why she became that. But she was just dumped. Just landed fully formed horror.
Yeah, and as I said, officers in the military don't generally act this way to subordinates. They don't act this way to the enlisted. There are some there probably are some examples where officers might. That's perfectly valid, but not to this degree. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam and everything. Have you?
It's been a while, but I really enjoyed that movie.
Okay. In terms of the character of Sergeant Major Dickerson, who is Adrian Cronauer, Robin Williams' character, is his direct superior. Dickerson, yeah, he's an ass, but he still gets the job done. Holdo is acting contrary to what we would consider an effective military officer to be. Personality is fine, but it needs to be consistent with what we understand in real world terms. And Holdo doesn't really fit that mold, unfortunately. I think the two ways you fix her, yeah, you could possibly introduce her in TFA. That's a possibility, sure. Yeah. But if you're just going to introduce her in The Last Jedi, okay, that's fine too. But you can make her that abrasive. You can make her that, but then you reveal she's a traitor to the freaking Resistance, and she's the one that rats them out to the First Order, and then you're like, well, she just didn't give a damn about him the whole darn time, and that explains it. And you have her just go on a completely unhinged rant, kind of reminiscent of Hux's and everything in TFA. She completely eviscerates and everything, verbally eviscerates everybody there, and then they lock her up, and who knows? Maybe you have somebody sneak back to her cell and end her.
Yeah, I do think she could have been possibly redeemed if she had demoted Poe and said, "Look, you got the job done, but you really screwed up the bigger plan."
Yeah.
And even giving a reason. They didn't even have to explain what the bigger plan was. They didn't have to say, you screwed it up for us. You've made things far more difficult for us. You're demoted. She didn't have to explain. In that case, she didn't have to explain because they had bigger plans. But that would have made her character's abrasiveness far more understandable because something happened that has made their job 10 times more difficult. You don't even have to explain it. You've just been told you made her job more difficult. That would have made her a much more believable and understandable character, and realizing then, even finishing with the Holdo maneuver, the only way to fix this now is to do that. It gives her character more meaning, and you're invested in her loss. I just said goodbye. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, or the bulkhead.
Yeah, exactly. So, and now, of course,
but
go ahead.
Now, I'm just thinking and this is something like I'm really enjoying doing, because while we're finding there are many, many flaws, we're still looking for positives. We're still not trying to deny the work that was put into 3 movies that people worked damn hard to make.
Yes.
Even if there's a lot of terrible, terrible writing in it and terrible portrayals. It is still good to see, well, what can we do? A normie and a Jedi Master, or you're with that image more of Sith Lord. What can we come up with? What can we come up with where we can give service to both and be positive?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and, the other matter is you've got the whole issue of for Skype. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's another force ability I would just completely go, nope, yoink, you're gone. That's going too far. Force empathy, force sense, and everything. Yeah, that's believable. But having this brand new ability that only one person or one character can have access to, okay, yeah, we had only one character in the OT that could do force lightning. That was the Emperor, obviously. He was the ultimate evil. He was the big bad. But maybe have Snoke, instead of it being force Skype, as what it's called by a lot of people, maybe bring in something from the EU. Hey, Ethan Brookholder, good to see you, bud. It's been a while. Glad you could pop in. Look into the scene at precisely the correct angle. You can see me waving at you and other chatters. Good to see you. I don't want to spoil anything in terms of my fan fiction with my backstory for Snoke, so I won't. But in terms of the movie Last Jedi and everything, bring something in from the EU and make Snoke really an intimidating character. Maybe have him during the final battle conjure a force storm, kind of an actual force storm, not the supercharged force lightning that we see Palpatine use in The Rise of Skywalker. So, okay, yeah, I'll look into that, Elysium. Thanks. So, but it's not difficult to fix the end of Last Jedi, considering the direction we're going in here. But as I said, remove the whole Force Skype thing. That's a little too difficult for people to believe. I mean, it's just, I get evolving force powers. It's been done throughout the entire Star Wars saga, particularly with the advancement of visual effects, obviously. But that just seems kind of like, it doesn't seem like a natural evolution for a force ability, at least to me. I don't know what you think and everything. If you were okay with the whole force Skyping between Rey and Kylo and everything, and having it being Snoke that was precipitating the whole matter.
I was okay with it if it had an explanation, because I had seen I Sense like in the original trilogy, where Luke and Vader were able to sense each other, where you can sense being able to speak. I'm not 100% sure. However, Force ghosts, if they can travel to the person, maybe. But using the Force as a connection, maybe. I was okay with it. And I wasn't thinking about it. But if there's no background to it, maybe it should not have been there.
Yeah.
Or it should have developed that maybe flashes, and only by the third movie that it became something.
Yeah.
End of the third movie, even.
Yeah. And what you were referencing was that exchange between Luke and Vader at the end of Empire Strikes Back, where they have that exchange back and forth, but it's all done through Force telepathy, in a manner speaking, and Vader's communicating through Luke in the Force, but they can't physically see each other. They can hear each other in each other's minds, but they can't actually see each other. Now that's something that I can believe, but stretching it to the extent where you can manifest
physically
solid
interact. Yeah, that didn't make sense.
Yeah, that was, if it had just been them talking backwards and forwards, okay, that's fine. But when it reaches the point where you see them in the same physical space, that's going way too far. If it had just been a telepathic connection, that's within the realm of the believability and within the realm of the lore that's already been established for Star Wars. But in terms of it being actually physically being able to be in the same space but not be in the same space, that's just a little too much.
Yeah, it was too much. It could be something that was developed not to that extent and not that quickly.
Yeah. Well, and Jason Brookholder, he brings up at Derek, I thought TFA looked like a beautiful overlong movie that was missing for me a story, a plot line based upon the characters. Instead, we had cool looking scenes. Continue. Cool looking scenes like a deck of pretty cards in no particular order that has no narrative thread, and the characters were there, but why they were doing this or helping this one. Yeah. Eastland, I can understand. Your typing's a little off, but I get what you're saying. I do. I get what you're saying exactly. So, okay.
Now, I have listened to some of like Andy Tracker does some great stuff.
Yes,
and he did make a great point that just actually carrying on to give credit, the third movie tried to fix a lot of the many flaws with the second movie. There wasn't. It probably needed, if it was 5 movies, he could have done something. Fix, but there wasn't enough time in one movie to fix all of the flaws.
Or
but
at the very go ahead.
I was saying, to be fair, the line we had been talking about how Luke was the line, "I was wrong." That seemed to be like an apology for this movie, where the flaws that were made. And I think that was nice service to what went wrong and to those long-term fans who have been disappointed by what had happened.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of wrap up the part of our discussion about the Last Jedi. If you want to give this a good, satisfying conclusion, I think something we had never seen before that I think it was time for was maybe a master and apprentice fighting side by side. You've got Rey and Luke. You've got Ben and Snoke facing off head to head.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that would have been much more satisfying. I think it would have been a very cool scene. I think, okay, maybe you've got Rey and Ben in a saber fight, and of course you've got Luke and Snoke. Now, Luke could still have his saber, obviously, but you have Snoke and Luke more in a force ability battle, kind of like reminiscent of Yoda and Count Dooku in the Attack of the Clones, but magnify it 10 times over.
Would you have had Luke and Rey lose here? Maybe Luke dying at that point and Rey escaping, but the effect of seeing his uncle dying starting to turn Kylo, having killed his twice. No, like this, something's wrong, something breaking within him, and have him start to turn here.
That's not necessarily a bad idea, particularly because in our version we've got a lot more time with Luke, say in The Force Awakens.
Yes.
That could be a different direction that could have worked. Or maybe even, it's okay, Eastland, don't worry. I've had those days myself. Don't worry about it. Or maybe have it end in a draw. Maybe give us one more movie with Luke, and maybe have him do a sacrificial act, but one last heroic act, and everything kind of really amp up. Ooh, that's an idea. How much do I want to say here? I just had an idea for the fan fiction. Maybe have.
Well, you don't have to give that away if it works. You can say we can discuss this in the fan fiction if you don't want to give your idea away.
Well, I won't give away the whole thing, but maybe just I'll go really, really vague. As I just said, maybe have Luke give one last heroic act to defeat Snoke or something like that, or something else along those lines.
Yeah.
And have it be the catalyst to bring Ben back over to the other side of things and away from Snoke. That could have even worked in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
So, and of course, Rise of Skywalker. You said 5 movies. If they were really willing and invested to make things right with the fans, maybe not 5, but at the very least 2, split into 2 movies. That could have possibly worked. But I know they tried to retcon a lot, and I'm retconning myself. I'm doing a retcon of a retcon.
But
well, in terms of The Rise of Skywalker, what do you want to touch upon in there? I mean, I imagine there's probably a lot, but we do have I've got a little time yet if you do. So
yeah, we can. I've got a bit of time myself.
Okay.
I suppose they did try and change a lot from what had gone on.
Oh, yeah.
And I know and they did try, and I will give credit, they did try and fix a lot of things I found. Even me, as a casual fan, it didn't seem to make sense. And like I mentioned previous, and Anti-Tracker raised it, the Luke's Force Ghost saying, yeah, I was wrong.
Well, minor spoiler for those of you that are following along with the my fan fiction. Luke is alive! Yes. If you haven't figured it out, Luke is alive in my fan fiction. Luke is not dead.
Yes.
But anyway, that's another point for another time. Go ahead, Elysium, please.
Yes. I would have, honestly, even the normie, I would love to have seen Luke still alive in this movie. And considering the unfortunate passing of
Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher, I was thinking Carrie Moss, but I said no, she's in the Matrix. God. Like Carrie Fisher. It was unfortunate because, there should have been at least one Skywalker alive throughout this movie, and unfortunately, Carrie Fisher couldn't be.
Yeah, and my fan fiction doesn't really address the fact that the actress who portrays the character dies.
Yeah.
I might do something with that. I might not. I haven't made up my mind yet, but that's another discussion for another time. They did what they could with Leia in The Rise of Skywalker. They only had so much footage that they could draw upon and everything. And they, like I said, they did the best they could. I know I gave a rather scathing review of it back in December. But unfortunately, I wasn't privy to a lot of things I am privy to now. Was I maybe overly harsh of J.J. Abrams? And some of you may say, Ambassador, what the heck are you talking about? J.J. Abrams is a hack. No. I don't think J.J. Abrams is the hack. I think the man has a lot of creative potential. I think he has done some movies and some projects that I enjoy. Now, can I see the faults in them? Yes, I can. Absolutely, I can. But that does not detract from my opinion that I think J.J. Abrams has potential to be a good creative. Does he lack in some areas? Yeah, but every creative does. George Lucas, for heaven's sakes, this man that we hold up as a geek icon, he lacks in some areas as a creative. No creative is perfect. No director, no writer, no producer, no set designer, nothing. None of them are perfect. But am I going to sit here and say, just because of one movie, J.J. Abrams is a hack? No, I'm not. J.J. Abrams has got a lot more good in his column that's good than in the other side of the column that's bad. Now, granted, that's my opinion. You disagree? Fine.
And to give him credit, he tried. Whether he succeeded or failed, for me, he succeeded. I enjoyed the movie. There was head-scratching moments, but I enjoyed it. And I just looking was it Easton Burkholder?
Yeah,
I will. The missed opportunity of Finn, and I think we touched on it earlier, but he's completely correct.
Yeah, Eastland, you are. I will wholeheartedly agree with you. Finn's story was so neglected. Yeah, I agree. And I'm addressing Finn's story. I'm giving him, I think, a satisfying story arc or character arc in my fan fiction. I'm trying, at least, But yeah, Finn was a completely missed opportunity. I mean, that's probably the tagline of the sequels. The sequel trilogy, a missed opportunity. Episode 6, 7, and 8. Sorry, guys, we missed the mark here.
Yes.
Yeah, Eastland, that's true. We have never seen the faces behind the stormtrooper mask, or thought of them as a person. I will say, in part, that is true. I will, in terms of the Clone Wars animated series, I think they do a really good job of exploring the dynamic of a army of clones that were just specifically created to wage war. And I think in the 7th season, especially, they explore that dynamic of, well, if the Clone Wars never started, the clones would never be here. I think that was our first peering behind the helmet of the Stormtrooper or the Clone Trooper. But we get a much deeper, we had the potential to get a much deeper look at someone that was essentially press-ganged into service of the First Order in terms of Finn. But we just completely lost all opportunity for that to have a really meaningful arc and for him to have a satisfying beginning, middle, and end of his journey.
I would have found it interesting if some of the troopers had joined the First Order because the Republic just didn't have the resources to police
Mm-hmm.
the space, and criminals had moved in or something had moved in that was hurting, was causing anguish, was hurting people, and they were just looking for some way to bring back order. And it wasn't out of malice that they joined, it was out of wanting the same thing the Republic wanted, but they just made a wrong choice.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. And Eastland, he brings up a point that's been brought up numerous times. They rushed the trilogy. I imagine the creatives did not help each other and did not stomp on the bad ideas of others, which led to this level of bad writing. The only way you get writing this bad. Yeah. I think, at first, and Elysium, you can chime in on this and everything. At first, I was enthusiastic for the idea of one Star Wars movie a year, but then I had to sit back and have a think, especially after The Last Jedi, and say, maybe they should have followed the Lucas model. One movie every 3 years.
They, like you have mentioned, the extended universe. There's a lot of stories to be told. I mean, I know we'll be covering this on another occasion, but the Star Wars stories like Solo, the
and Rogue One,
they had other stories to tell. They didn't even need to be large tales.
No,
but in between the new trilogy, tell little side stories back, give more information.
Well, yeah. Well, and if you remember, I don't know how much you remember, we got Rogue One, we got Solo, we were going to potentially get a Boba Fett movie, we were potentially going to get an Obi-Wan movie, we were possibly even going to get a Yoda movie. Now, I know some people say, Yoda is supposed to be enigmatic. We're not supposed to know a whole lot about him. Okay, fair enough. I still would have gone and seen it because we all have a special place in our hearts for the character of Yoda. And it didn't even necessarily have to explore his origins, where his home planet, the name of his race, all of that stuff. It didn't have to go that route. They could have done any number of things with Yoda that they wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Easton Brookholder, you're probably far off the mark there, bud. But yeah, I think a lot of things were rushed. Unfortunately, I think more time should have been given. Now, am I saying if J.J. Abrams and Lawrence Kasdan and Chris Terrio and Ryan Johnson had more time, they could have done a better movie? That's a what if. They could have. It's a possibility. If they had been given more time and more thought and effort was putting into writing good stories, maybe we could have gotten something better. Maybe we could have gotten something far, far worse, although I can't imagine how much worse these movies could have gotten. But it simply comes down to, well, I'm going to reference a movie you're probably familiar with. Could have been called the chip. Easton, if you've got a typo there, fix your typo. But I think honestly the biggest problem with the sequel trilogy was time. Not enough time was given to create good movies. It was rushed. It was entirely too rushed.
Yeah. There should have been maybe one showrunner for the 3 movies and say, look, we're going here, we're going here, we're going here. And yes, let the different directors tell their stories within it. But when they had no vision of where it was going, it needed more time. they could have done it in the time they did if they had the story planned from start to finish.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we know now from certain sources or anything that wasn't the case, which was a shame.
Yes.
Okay, to get to quote, called in and been engaged and not totally. Yeah, greed, ego, want to assign percentages.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aislinn, you're not entirely wrong there. I think the one thing I will say, and this is a quote from Jurassic Park: before you even knew what you had, you patented it and you packaged it and you slapped on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling. You want to sell it. In Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum. I think that honestly, right there, that line is very emblematic of the sequel trilogy. Disney got their hands on Lucasfilm, and before they knew what they had, before they really appreciated what they had at their fingertips, they patented it and they packaged it and they shoved it on the side of a plastic lunchbox and a dozen other different things, and they just started selling. And
I think you're right there. I think that was one of the problems. They were looking at selling merchandise rather than paying attention to the story.
and here's the thing, Elysium. Selling merchandise is part and parcel of any movie franchise. You and I both know this. I mean, for heaven's sakes, George Lucas practically revolutionized the whole concept of merchandising. I mean, for heaven's sakes, Mel Brooks pokes fun at it, but you know what? George Lucas. Yeah, Eastland, that's true. It came too easy for you. Yeah, I would agree. That's a good part of that quote as well. Yeah. I mean, for heaven's sakes. And Lucas, he gave Mel Brooks his blessing to make Spaceballs, and he put that scene in there. And I would imagine Lucas probably went, yeah, you're probably a little bit right there, Mel. Yeah. Sorry, it's not my best George Lucas, but it works. But Luke,
do you know what? I actually have no problem with the merchandising if it finances great movies, great entertainment. It pays back effort going in. I have no problem with that.
I agree. I mean, for heaven's sakes, I went and bought a lot of the merchandise for TFA. I didn't really buy anything for The Last Jedi. I bought absolutely nothing for Rise of Skywalker. At that point, I was like, I'm not buying a thing that's associated with this film. They were lucky to get my money when we went to the movies and when we bought the Blu-ray. But, the truly unfortunate thing about the sequels is twofold. And again, as I said at the start of the stream, if you are a fan of the sequels, you are still a fan. You're still part of the Star Wars fandom, and I still consider you a fellow member of this fandom. But the problem was not at the hands of the fans. It was in the hands of those who were in charge of this and didn't really appreciate, or maybe they did appreciate and they just didn't care what they had at their fingertips. And Ethan Burkholder says they did not understand what they were trying to make. If I try to help with a romantic comedy, which I hate the genre, I will need people with the touch who can do that genre. Yeah, Eastland, that's true. I myself, I like rom-coms to an extent. There are some I won't watch or anything because, well, I have standards. But still, there are some rom-coms I do enjoy. As a guy, obviously. But unfortunately, that's when I look at the sequel trilogy, I no longer look at something that makes me angry, that makes me mad. That part of me has passed. It's kind of like the stages of grief. And to the chat, Dan 23, I I've got 4 Stormtrooper figures today, and on a package, each from a different movie. Dan, that's awesome, man. That is awesome, bud. Truly. But as I started saying, we'll probably, Lacey, if you're okay, we're probably going to wrap up here in a few minutes.
Yeah, no hassle. I mean, this has been fun.
Yes, it has, and we've got one more to go. And that's going to be a fun one right there.
And I'm really in your hands there because I know very little about the EU. I've heard things, but I know very little.
Well, and that'll be something we touch on next week. But my closing remarks, and Elysium, you can give yours, and then we'll close out. At first, I was angry, and then I was resentful, and now I have passed through all the different stages of mourning. I'm at acceptance. Eastland, good to see you, bud. You take care, bud. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
TNT channel for free, by all. I like R2-D2, and one version of the sequels, they would have killed the character. Oh, that would have made a lot of people upset. Anyway, I am at the point where I am at peace with the sequels. They exist. It's done. The people who love them, I say, we are all fans. It's time for this fandom to stop being divided. And it's time to reach across the aisle and say, you know what? If you love the sequels, you are a fan. If you love the PT or the OT or the EU, you are a fan. If you love Star Wars when it was solely under the control of George Lucas, or whether you love Star Wars that's under the control of, well, relatively speaking, under the control of Disney, you are a fan. I myself, I came into this as a young man many moons ago, when all we had was the original trilogy, and then we got the prequels, and then we got the EU, or we got the EU, and then we got the prequels. So I say, regardless of generation, regardless of age, regardless of perspective, we are all fans of this great fandom. We are all part of this great fandom. And it's time for this fandom to heal. It's time for the great schism in the Star Wars fandom to end. And maybe, unlike those Jedi of many eons past in the expanded universe, who looked at their brothers and sisters in the Force and said, we want no part of you. Maybe we can learn something from what the mistake they made and say to those that are on the opposite side of the fandom, welcome back to the Order. Welcome home. Because here, we are all one with the Force. And the Force is all with us.
Well said.
So, Elisa, any final thoughts before we close?
For me, I'm a casual fan, and I've loved the movies. There's room for the casual. It's a huge universe there. There's room for the casual fan, and there's room to do service for those who have been long-term fans. There's room for new fans. It's a big universe, and we can all enjoy it.
Yep.
And my hope is there's rumors of, in a few years' time, more movies, that they do service to what has gone before, and allow new fans, people like me, to come in and enjoy this wonderful franchise. And just be respectful of each other, regardless of your feelings on any one or all movies. You like it, you dislike it, we're still fans. There's places we can meet. We can meet in places and discuss and talk. And I can talk about the little things I enjoy. You can talk about the lore. You fill me in on stuff. May this a much bigger universe for me to explore, much more enjoyable. And I thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the extended universe.
And I'll be happy to share everything I know. So,
as long as you don't mind me walking slack-jawed and open mouth, I am happy.
No, not at all. All right, well, folks, we're going to close out here. To everybody that's been in the chat, Eason Brookholder, Dan23, Speaker for the Dead, Derek McManus. Derek McManus. I'm sure there were others in here and everything. They were just lurking.
Oh, and Sir Nerdalot.
Yeah, Sir Nerdalot. He was here too. So, to all you that were in the chat, whether you spoke up or whether you were just lurking, thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And just a couple of things. Tomorrow afternoon, me and Mountains of Elysium and Classic Comics and Fiona Wolf will be back with another review of Babylon 5 Season 2. And we'll be covering A Spider in a Web. And then, of course, this Friday night, I'll be wrapping up the ambassadorial birthday party with one final watch party. And we'll be watching the great 80s classic Clue. And that'll be at 7 p.m. Central Time. So, and of course, guys, if you have not subscribed to Mountains of Elysium or anybody that's in the chat, please do so. Mountains has got a great channel, as does Sir Nerdalot. I know he's trying to put out some content. Go find these guys. I will try and put links to their channels down in the description after this stream ends and everything. But go support these guys. They are great channels. They are great content creators, and I give them my full endorsement as the ambassador. So, anyway, folks, until next time, may the force be with you. This is the ambassadors signing off.